hey Mika. So I was at an art convention recently, and one of the vendors had this really cute vest that I didn't get a picture of. Oh Mika, don't leave. It looks like this, and it also has these really colorful geometric tapestry core embroidery on it. Long story short, I really want this vest. Maybe not the exact same, but I really love the style of it. And so for this video, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to recreate this little vest, and hopefully it'll all work out because I don't even have a proper reference image to work off of. Hi, my name is Emily, and I am an intermediate seamstress. Hello, Mika. Anything to say? Milo? So originally the plan was going to get a quilt or a fabric that is chic and classy. Clearly that's not what transpired. But before we can get cutting into this cute froggy fabric, we gotta come up with the pattern first. And before we can do that, let me give you a tour of this quilt. I found it in the thrift store for $3. It features a plethora of colorful frogs chilling in the pond. And if you think that's it, think again, because the other side features a different squad of froggos hanging out with some ducks. A lot of clues point to the fact that this little blankie was handmade, such as the visible basting stitches along the sides, the clearly hand-stitched bias trim, and although this doesn't necessarily point to handcrafting, quite a bit of the quilting stitches are falling out. Clearly, this blanket was very well loved. So the thing about pre-quilted fabrics is that I'm always worried about what I'm going to do about the seams because I don't want them to get super bulky. Luckily for me, I'm pretty sure the pattern of the vest just looks like this. Like a little life vest. And then the raw edges are all just bound with bias tape. So it should be pretty simple, but still, I want to use my mannequin here to draft up a more accurate pattern than what I just did in my sketchbook. My mannequin doesn't have a name yet. Also, I just got a new camera, so if the shot looks very off, like look at all this empty space on top, it's because I'm still figuring out how to use this thing. In fact, I just realized my mic wasn't even on this whole time. Anyway, help me figure out a name for my mannequin, and I'm gonna grab some paper and start drafting. Mock-up time. So because I didn't actually get a good look at the front of the vest, I'm going to Google some of those Pinterest pictures. Pinterest quilted vest. So it was sort of this style, but it was more cropped, so it ended about here. And it didn't have the arm curve going around, it was just flat. Like I said, basically like a life vest. Related pictures. Ooh, I suppose it's something like this. Okay, we can do that. And it has sort of a V-neck. Let me get my sketchbook if I can remember where I put it. And then this bias would also come out over top of this bias. I think we have something figured out. I'm just gonna go measure the mannequin and figure out what the crop length is exactly. So in the previous video where this mannequin made an appearance, I mentioned that it's not exactly the same measurement as me, but that's fine. I think it's close enough. For the crop length, I think it should end probably like at the ribs. I think I need a longer tape measure. Oops, excuse me. And now we just gotta figure out the distance of the back and the front. 26 minus 15 is 11. 11 plus 8 is 21. 26 minus 21 is 5. After that riveting and possibly incomprehensible content, I finally got to making the mock-up pattern. I feel like this is also a good point to say that my original plan when I bought this quilt was to make a jacket, like the ones that With Wendy makes. But it was a good thing I decided to make a vest instead because there definitely was not enough material to make a whole jacket. That's the right length. I realized the shoulder angle might cause some trouble. I guess I should try it on myself because I'm not as busty as this mannequin. I feel like we'll get a more accurate read on this once we get this onto a piece of fabric. Okay, so now that I have it down on fabric, I think the width of it is perfectly fine. Let's see if you can see the back. There's a bit of bulging in the back on the shoulders, right here. Pink, pink. that probably is still a problem with the shoulder slant. Yeah, let's just move on. I wonder how I would style this. The person I saw styled it with a collared shirt and then a tie. I guess I should try that as well. I am also going to round the sharp corners. Nice and rounded. You know the problem I just realized? If I want the frogs to be upright on the front, then they're gonna be upside down in the back. But I really don't want to do shoulder seams. At the same time, I do want my frogs to be upright. Oh, what do I do? Well, before we get cutting anyway, there are some more tedious things we have to take care of. For one, some of the quilting is falling off, as I showed you guys before, so I do have to get those somewhat secure. And also, the bias trim I'm gonna add on the vest, I'm thinking that I'm going to reuse this candy cane red and white striped bias on the blanket, so I have to stitch rip all of that off as well. Look at all this thread that just came off. So luckily for me, whoever made this quilt had a problem with their sewing machine where one side of the thread didn't get pulled all the way to the other side of the fabric, which means it's very easy for me to take apart. Unfortunately, I think that is also the cause of all the quilting falling out. After a billion years, I finally got one side of the bias trim out. 3 more sides to go. Now, while this trim was technically already in bias tape formation, they were hand sewn on, and that came with some hand sewing charm, such as it being incredibly uneven on both sides sometimes. So I had to iron them all out. And also, I've come to a verdict while I was stripping all of this bias trim. I will need to separate the front and back of the vest so that the frogs are upright on both sides. It is a very painful decision because I really wanted it to be one piece, but I think it has to be done. Excuse my neighbor's AC blasting, but since I'm separating the front and back, I might as well add the shoulder slopes as well. This is one of my favorite shirts, and I'm just going to trace the shoulder angle. Cutting the pattern in half exposed some very atrocious angles in the neck hole, so I really quickly smoothed that out. It's still not perfectly smooth, but it should be much better now. And then cut out the new shoulder slopes onto the mock-up fabric. You know how I just cleaned my room in the last video? Yeah, look over there. My path to the washroom is completely blocked. See, much less puckering than before. I think this should be good enough. I hope. Have confidence, Emily. You can do this. I wonder if it's worth doing a mock-up in a better fabric just to ensure this works before I try cutting it out on my froggy fabric. Froggy fabric. It's very high stakes because I don't have much of that froth. Why can't I say it? Froggy fabric. Yeah. Ooh. This one would be fun. I think for this experiment to work, we do need something reasonably thick and hefty. Let's see how thick this one is. This one's pretty thick, actually. Not this one, too thin, even though it is very cute. Let me show you. Look, it's got a pig, it's got cows, it's got a cowboy family, and it's got a little dog. I ended up choosing the bright red stationery core fabric, along with 2 packs of crimson bias tape. But before any mocking up can occur, I definitely need to clean my room again. So I actually don't know what I planned to do with this fabric when I bought it. It just looked very unique, very interesting, talented, never seen before. It's giving Miss Frizzle. I just wanted to have this fabric. We need 2 of these front pieces, 1 of this piece that we can fold in half and cut on the fold. Okay, so now we attach these at the shoulders. I've sewed together the shoulders. I actually did a French seam just so it's cleaner on the inside, and then I top stitched it down so that it lays nice and flat. I also gave the fabric a good iron, although I guess it didn't really work. Now we're going to bind all the raw edges with the bias tape. Now I can't say I've done too many bias tapes before, but I thought I watched enough sewing YouTube videos to know how it all worked. First, I attached the tape to the wrong side of the fabric. We're going to take this, flip the bias trim towards the outside, and then sew it down with a top stitch from the front side. And I think I do have to clip the curves here a little because they're getting really bunched up. I also clipped the bias trim as well. And all of that compounded should hopefully make it less bunchy and bulky. So unfortunately, the edges do curl up a bit because of the curves. I wonder if any ironing would fix this. And if ironing doesn't fix this, then I guess I have to look up some tutorials or something.
You're going to start with your bias tape and you're going to pre-press it into the shape of that curve before you stitch it on.
Why is he drinking like that? Here it is, nice and pressed. And notice that while I was ironing it, it smelled very strongly of a grandmother's house. I don't know if that was a bias tape or the fabric itself, but that's what it smells like. Check this out, perfectly flat. It's truly amazing. It's almost like tutorials exist for a reason. Anyway, now I have to apply bias tape to the rest of the raw edges. For the neck hole, there does need to be quite a bit of excess in the middle here for the tie over the chest. And same goes for the side raw edges as well. Where it meets the other bias tape here, it's gonna have to stick out by a lot here as well so that it can tie together under your armpits. Let's grab a ruler and figure out how much excess we should do exactly. Bow tie. It's about like this, which is, let's say 10 inches on both sides. Now we gotta go iron this again. Here is the bias trim all done on the neck hole. And I know I'm putting a lot of effort into this mock-up. I just want to make sure my froggy vest will be perfect. Unfortunately, I discovered the ties were way too short. I also didn't have enough bias tape for both armholes, so I extended the tape on one side with some very scratchy black ribbon, and the other side had no ties and was instead just sewn together. Can't believe I thought this project was going to be quick and easy. This bias trim is taking me so long. So here is the vest. I think the general theme of this mock-up is just that everything is just a little too small. The ties are too short, the sides are a little too short, and also I feel like the vest itself could be possibly a little bit wider. For the actual froggy vest, no ties on the side, just connections, longer connections, and then longer ties. You can also see here that the edge of the bias tape is not totally hidden here. I think that's the same for everywhere the bias tape meets. See, just a bit peeking out right over here. Look at this. I know I say I'm an amateur, but even for me, this is very amateur work. So I did learn a lot from this smock-up, this smock-like mock-up. Also, on the last armhole, I decided to use a much closer top stitching, as you can see here, compared to the rest of the bias binding. And I think it just looks much more professional when it's that tight to the edge. So for the froggy vest, that's what I'll do. But I've had enough of sewing curves for the day, so I'm gonna take a break. So it is the next morning and I have drawn a new pattern piece. As you can see, it is much wider and it has a more pronounced neck hole. And I'm going to cut yet another piece of mock-up just to make sure it'll all work out. Oh, hello Mika. This looks more like vest proportions. I know previously I said I would fix the quilting first, but actually I think I'll cut out the patterns first and then fix the quilting. I think that just makes more sense. Last night I also stitch ripped all of the bias trim so that they're all individual pieces, except the ones that are very well connected. Like, this seam is so professional that you can't even tell from the front. And I'm really hoping I have enough of this, but if I don't, I can always use this trim and this trim. If I'm smart about this, and if I don't mess up, I could make 2 vests out of this fabric. Man, how do I pin through such thick fabric? So clearly that's not gonna work out, so I'm just gonna avoid cutting the fabric on a fold and just do it straight up. Single ply, nice and flat. Chop! Mika. I think Mika wants to help. That was so scary. Here's a look at the other side. Now let's cut out the rest of the pieces. So the first thing we're going to do is attach the pieces at the shoulders. And just like before, I want to encapsulate the raw edges on both sides. And to do that, we're basically going to be treating the front pieces like a giant piece of bias tape. First, I'm going to unpick any quilting 1 inch away from the edge of the shoulder. Now I'm going to fold back the fabric on both sides and trim 1 inch off the batting. And now I'm gonna iron this inwards by 1/2 inch on both sides. And now that it's in bias tape formation, we can just attach it to the back piece like you would normal bias tape. So, wrong sides together first. And then just like bias tape, we fold the fabric to the front side and then top stitch that down. Ta-da! Nice and clean on both sides. Okay, looking pretty good. No puckering on the shoulders whatsoever. I think we can move on. Alright, let's get bias tape in. Here I am laying out the pre-existing candy cane bias trim to see if I had enough. I have to remember that I need 20 inch of tie. 20 inch is a lot. Do I actually need 20 inch? Let's do 18 because that's the length of my ruler. Here's my very accurate mock-up. I'll use the pre-existing ones for the shoulder, all the front-facing pieces basically. And then for the back, where people are less likely to notice, I'm gonna use the harvested fabric from the quilt. Look at the carcass of where I took the bias tape material. Oh, this poor fabric. And now I'm going to turn them into bias tape with this doodad. Ah yes, here you can see I was trying to get one of those smooth, one-shot, internet-worthy bias trim pulls, but it ended up, well, bad. Clearly, I'm not that good at making bias tape. So I quickly undid all of it. I tried it again, and through this very humbling experience, I realized that I shrimply was not, and still am not, professional enough to do a satisfying bias tape pull. You, however, can watch this time-lapse and pretend that I did do it that quickly. And now I gotta fold all of this in half. And I thought sewing bias tape took forever. The thing is, this morning, I woke up, I was like, I can probably finish this vest today. And I didn't realize the bias tape was gonna take so freaking long. And I probably could still finish the vest today, but I don't wanna. I got everything laid out like a corpse. Let's do this one and this one. I may not like the entire process of bias binding, but can't deny that it looks satisfying as all hell. You can still see some of the thread from the other side coming through here. I could stitch rip it, but also this time I picked a color that sort of blends in with the dark blue, so I think it'll be fine if I just leave it there. Time for the binding around the neck. Let me introduce you to Milo Shrimp. I really don't know how I'm going to fix this quilting. Do I just like stick it in my machine and hope for the best? Or should I just keep it like this and just let it fall apart on its own until I finally buy a quilting foot? Yeah, let's go with option 2. And that's that on being lazy. I mean, saving time. So I tried to use the straight across bias trim for the back of the vest, but no matter how much I tried, the bias tape would not curve the way I wanted it to. Probably because it wasn't cut on a bias, just a wild guess here. So I ended up using what little was left of that crimson bias tape from the mock-up. Now all that's left to do is the armholes and then we're done. And with the armholes done, it is now time for the final reveal. finally home after a very long day. I'm too lazy to whip out my fancy camera, so phone footage it is. Had a great day. A lot of people complimented me on my outfit, which I'm very happy about. I'm glad people like it. I'm very oily, sweaty. I need to go take a shower. Thank you to everyone who came by. Thank you to people who complimented my outfit. I hope you like this outfit. Alright, one last look at the froggy fit. Bye! See you guys next time!